Happy Wednesday, mathematicians. Today for math, you're going to need your math notebook, your Envisions workbook with your black and white pages, highlighters, pencil, and your blue resource folder. Remember, your blue resource folder should stay inside your anchor binder. You're just going to go ahead and open it up. When you take off your black clip, be very mindful that this first paper I'm going to ask you to not use, so you can go ahead and stick that in the right side for now. That was a sheet that was put in there. That's actually for our next chapter, so we don't need it. We're then going to take the teach page that says 3-3 partial products and the right side page or example page that starts with the problem, find 2 times 105. So those are the two sheets that you're going to need today. Then go ahead and carefully place those back on the left side pocket with your black clip. Tuck that away in your binder and put that back in your basket. You're then going to open up your notebook back to yesterday's lesson, which we were focusing on estimating products. So make sure that you have already finished your practice problem from yesterday and you have written your reflection. So we're going to go ahead and turn the page, and we're going to insert the new page numbers, which are page 44 on the left and then 45 on the right. And then we're going to turn to the table of contents. And remember, you can always pause your video to get caught up and then push play when you're ready to continue. So on page 44, we're going to write the title of today's lesson, which we're going to be focusing on partial products. So within this new chapter, we're multiplying by one-digit factors for one of the factors, and then the second factor is always going to be a larger factor. And we are going to learn different strategies on how to solve that multiplication problem. So today we're focusing on partial products, and today's date is 9-23-20. Once you're done writing your table of contents, go ahead and turn back to the pages we've already labeled. You're going to be placing the page that says 3-3 on the left side, and then the one that says example practice reflection on the right side. So use your glue stick. Go ahead and turn your page over. Make your frame on the outside and X through the middle. Remember to place it close to the bottom of the page and then smooth it down. And then if you have written your page number and accidentally glued over, just go ahead and rewrite it on top so you can make sure that you're staying organized with those page numbers. On the right side, do the same thing with your glue stick. Frame on the outside, X through the middle, and then smooth it down from the bottom towards the top. So as we said, this is our third unit that we're working in, and this chapter is focused on multiplication using a larger factor multiplied by a one-digit factor. So we have started the lessons for this chapter with estimating products, so using our skills of how we round numbers to find an answer that's going to be close to the exact. And then we started our first lesson on how to multiply with multiples. So using our skip counting and zeros trick to help us with those multiplication problems. So today we're going to be working with partial products. So we're going to write the title on the top of our page. So write partial products. And this is going to be important for you to keep track of the different strategies that you are taught how to multiply, because in the end, you will be able to choose the method that works best for you or that makes the most sense, unless the question specifies that you have to use a specific strategy to multiply. So these methods are slightly different than what your parents might have been taught when they were in 4th grade. So it's important for you to listen to the video and the set of steps, and if you have questions, to write Mrs. Lang so we can work out those problems. The first part is going to talk about the vocabulary word partial products. So use your highlighter and highlight that. And partial products means that it's part of the answer. So I'm going to underline the first part of the word partial. And this refers to, and we're going to write ourselves a little reminder note, part of the answer. So it says partial products are the products found by multiplying each place value of one factor by another factor. So this is going to be important for us to realize that partial product means the larger factor is going to be pulled apart using our expanded form. So we're going to just put in parentheses as a reminder, this is going to deal back with expanded form. And we covered expanded form in our first unit when we talked about forms of numbers. So the first example is asking us to multiply the one-digit factor of 4 by the multi-digit number of 125. So we're going to go through some steps on how to pull apart the larger factor into the value for each of those place values. So the first step, it says to find the partial products, multiply the number of groups, which is the first factor, which is a 4. So we say the single digit number is going to be referred to as groups. So we're going to just go ahead and highlight that word. So we're going to multiply it by groups of 4. So if we look at this number, we're going to pull it apart to say, okay, well, 125 is the same thing as saying the 1 is in the hundreds place. So we put it 100 with the addition sign. The 2 is in the tens place, so that means that there's a 20. In the last value, there's a 5 in the ones place. So we end by saying 5. So when we use expanded form to rewrite the value of 125, it is the same value of having these separated into place values of 100 plus a 20 plus 5. So when we look at when we're multiplying by groups, we're multiplying by the place values. So I'm going to underline ones, and that's what is in the ones place. So we're multiplying by a basic fact of 4 times 5 to give us the product of 20. The next place value, we move back to the tens place to say, well, there is a value of 20, so we say we're multiplying by 4 groups of 20 using that zeros trick by crossing out the 0 in the factor, moving it to the product. And then what is left is our basic fact to multiply. So 4 times 2 gives me the value of 8. So that product is 80. We just use our zeros trick to help us multiply. And then when we go to the largest place value of the original number, we say the value is a 100. So we're going to multiply 4 groups of 100, use the zeros trick again, move both of those zeros to the product, lasso the basic fact that's left. 4 times 1 gives me the value of 4. We place that in front to make the value of 400. When we look to the right, they've given us a model that represents the same information. So originally we said the number was 125 multiplied by 4 groups. So if we're making 4 groups of the number 125, the first group is represented using the manipulatives for 125. So there's 1 flat, which is 100. There's 2 rods, which that is 20. And then 5 units, which is 5 ones. So it represents 125. So then going down from top to bottom, that is now placed in 4 groups of the same value. We then are using those separated values for the products to add them back together. So we consider these to be our partial products. So we're going to go ahead and off to the side, just give ourselves a little visual reminder. So I'm going to put little arrows, and I'm going to write that those are considered partial products, meaning they're part, that's why the word partial is there, part of the actual product or answer. So these are like little puzzle pieces to the bigger or grander picture. So we're going to place those on our addition sentence. So we're going to put the first product of 20. We're going to add it to the second product of 80. And we're going to add it to the last product of 400. So in the expanded form, we're going to push those values back together to say 20 plus 80 is 100. 100 plus 400 gives me a final product of the number 500. When I look at the original problem, I now have the answer that I can plug in because I was able to pull apart the large factor into 3 smaller, more manageable steps. Looking at the next problem, it's the same type of example with a different number. This time it asks us to multiply 5 groups of 137. On the right side, they're already showing us how we can represent that. So along the bottom, along the side, we're going to make 5 different groups. And along the top, from side to side, we're going to represent that with a value of 137. They have already shown us the first group. So if we say that this is the first group, we're going to make 4 more, so that totals 5 groups altogether. So I'm just going to give myself a little reminder of where I place them. So I'm going to show the same exact manipulatives for each of these groups. So I have 100s flat, 3 rods, and I have to do 7 units. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I do the same thing for the third group. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. For my fourth group, so 1 flat, 3 rods, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units. And then for my fifth group, the same thing, 1 flat, 3 rods, and 7, 5, 6, 7, or maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're showing the exact same type of model for each of my 5 groups, and that's according to the original problem. Now we're going to pull this number, which is our larger factor, into expanded form. So we're going to pull it into the values. So there's a 1 in the hundreds place, so that means it's a 100. There's a 3 in the tens place, so that means it's a 30. And a 7 in the ones place, so that's a 7. So when we rewrite that expanded form of our second factor, or the larger factor, we need to remember they have addition signs to show that is combined to be one original number. So now we can use this information to help us solve. So it says complete the array on the right. We just finished that. Use the array to find the partial product. So remember, the number 5s refers to how many groups, or the single factor. So we said there's 5 groups of 7, so that refers to those 7 units. So there's 5 groups of 7 units. So that's 5 times 7 is the product of 35. The second problem now is 5 groups of 30. So remember, those 3 rods equal 30 because each one represents a 10. So it's 10, 20, 30. So there's 5 groups of those. So using the zeros trick, take your 0, place it on your product, lasso the basic fact. 5 times 3 gives me the product of 15. I place in front of the 0. So once I've used my zeros trick, 5 times 30 is a grand total of 150. Moving to the last value, I use my zeros trick again. There's 2 zeros, so I put 2 zeros on the answer line. Lasso the basic fact left. 5 times 1 gives me a 5 in front to make it a 500. Once I found my partial products, remember that's what we just determined, part of the grand total, we then have to add them back together. I always like to start with my addition by just making sure my greatest or my largest number is up top. It just helps with me lining up the place values correctly. So once we've stacked those 3 values, we can add them together. So 0 plus 0 plus 5 is 5. 0 plus 5 plus 3 is 8. 5 plus 1 is 6. So my final product is 685. Moving to the right, we're doing the same type of work. You see the original problem of 2 groups of 105, so it's 2 times 105. So in the model, they're showing us the first group is already drawn for us. There's 1 flat, which represents the value of a 100 and 5 units. So that's the first group. And they've drawn a second group right underneath it. So a second group of 105. So when we think of this original number, they have split it into values. So we said 105 is the same thing of saying 100 plus 5. So when we look at this, we can then start working on those partial product problems. So 105 times 2, we're going to solve by saying, well, we're going to multiply the value of 2 times 5 first. So when we multiply 2 times 5, we're looking at only the ones place. So we should be able to find that product because it's one of our basic facts. So we've already done the 5. Now we have to multiply using the last place value. So we say, well, there's 2 groups of 100. And when we use this, we use the zeros trick, move them into the product. And I'm just going to go ahead and write the problem back up there, or the answer. And then we have the basic fact 2 times 1 to give us 2. So when we have the new product, we know that we can also then plug it in to say I multiply the 2 groups of the 100, which is the flats. And that gives me the total of the 200. Now I have my 2 partial products that I can combine to find my overall product or my final answer. So when I add my values, I then am able to determine the answer as 210. When you look at your practice problem today, remember to use your problem solving steps to underline, to box, and to circle. And there might be multiple steps that we need to use to solve. So we're going to do this one together. It says, what multiplication equation do the place value blocks show? So that's the first thing. So we're going to indicate that this is problem number 1. There's 2 questions we're solving. So we're going to solve for the first one first. So we're not even going to look at the actual second problem yet. We're going to solve for the first one. So what multiplication equation do the place value blocks show? So we know that when we look from the top going down, that indicates how many groups or how many rows there are. So I'm going to count. There is 1, 2, 3 groups. So I'm going to say that this is 3 groups. Or you might consider them to be called rows. We like to use the word groups because it just helps us visualize that these all go together when they're separated into rows. So there's 3 groups, and now we have to determine what is the actual value within a group. So we have to count from left to right. So there's 1, 2, 3 flats. So that tells me that there's a 3 in the hundreds position. I then move to the next manipulative. There are 2 rods. We should know that the rods represent 10, so 2 tens, or I can skip count 10, 20. That means there's a 2 in the tens place. And then the units right off to the side of that first row, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 units. So that's a 4 in the ones place. So when we look at this particular problem for step number 1, the equation shows us 3 groups of 324. So we have just shown the first step. The second part of the problem says, find the product. So when we find the product, that means we actually have to solve for the answer. So instead of multiplying that as a value in itself, I'm going to use partial product to say that that is the same value of 300 plus 20 plus 4. And we can use our visual model off to the side to help us remember what that is. So when we multiply, we're going to be saying we're multiplying those individually by the amount of groups. So I can start by saying 3 times 300 equals, and that's because I am looking at the first factor to say 3 groups of 300. Use my zeros trick, put them in the answer. Lasso the basic fact. 3 times 3 gives me the value of 9. The second value, which is my tens value, I would say there's 3 groups times 20 in each of those groups. So once again, using my zeros trick, take the 0, place it in the answer. Lasso the basic fact. 3 times 2 gives me the number 6 to make a value of 60. And then my last one is 3 groups of 4 units. So I multiply the basic fact of 3 times 4 to give me the total of 12. When I have my 3 partial products, I can then add them back together. 0 plus 0 plus 2 gives me 2. 0 plus 6 plus 1 gives me the sum of 7. And then 9 is nothing to add, so I bring it down to the total. So my answer so far for the product is 972. The remaining part of the word problem says, then write a problem that could be solved using this model. So finding the product was our second step. We just finished solving for our second step. The third step is to write the problem. So I'm going to write a number 3. So we have 3 steps to solve. So I'm going to write my problem, and I want you to go ahead and write the same so you can see the information. So I'm going to just put a number 3. So we can start with Mrs. Ling has, and I'm going to use that first factor because we know it's a group. So we're going to say 3 crates of, and I'm going to use my second factor of the amount in it. So Mrs. Ling has 3 crates of 324 apples in each, period. How many apples does she have? Question mark. So we are covering the factors that we need multiplying. So 3 crates or 3 groups of 324 of the item. And then the question is, how many apples does she have? So we would want to then go back and refer to our equation. So we had the initial problem to indicate what is the model already representing. We used partial product to find the actual product or final answer of that problem. And then we had to create our own word problem that matched the numbers that they had previously given us. So today, for the remaining part of your notebook work, you're going to write your own reflection statement, thinking about how can you record the steps of using partial products to find the answer to a multiplication question. Remember, you have to write 3 to 5 sentences using capital letters, punctuation mark, and that it's a complete sentence. When you're done, you're going to be pulling out the pages 31 and 32. At the top, it gives you the same topic number or lesson number, 3-3. So this is our classwork for today. And you're going to be completing the even numbers. So remember, the even numbers, you're going to solve for everything for that number. So on the front, there's only one large problem. You're going to use the model they have created to fill in the missing numbers. So remember, the 3 that they've already given you already shows you there's 3 groups. So that's the first group, the second group, and then the third group. So think about how can you use expanded form to show the values that you'll plug in for those place values. On the back, you're going to solve number 6, number 8, and number 10. When you're done with those problems on your classwork, remember to take a picture of your full notebook pages we worked on today and both sides of your classwork to submit. If you have any questions, reach out to me.